Welcome, Hoosier Nation, to another edition, our 16th episode of the Hoosier Life. Josh and I are coming at you on a Thursday, a chilly Thursday afternoon in Bloomington. However you're listening, if you're watching us live, it's good to see you. Our Twitter mentions will be open throughout the show. If you guys have anything you want to say, I'm at M_Dugan44, and as you can see on the screen, that is at Josh Eastern. So come on in. Let us know if you have any questions, comments. We'll be sure to answer them before or after or during the show, really. I guess before is not really an option. So during or after, I meant to say, if you're watching live, if you're not watching live, if you're listening or watching later. So thanks for tuning in. We've got a great one planned for you today, all the way down to the final second, as usual. So, Josh, let's get right to this. So another rough weekend for IUFB in Evanston this past weekend. They went up there for the first time since 2012 where they lost by 2 scores, and they lost by 2 scores again. You were on the call. What was the one thing that you saw, kind of that big takeaway that you just can't quite get your head around, or something that made that game kind of unwinnable for the Hoosiers and maybe a red flag going forward?
Well, just something from that game was just they couldn't stop Austin Carr in the first half, and that really just put them behind the 8 ball the entire game, because that really magnified the struggles of Richard Lego. I mean, they were down 24 to whatever it was. They were down a lot in that game. They only scored 1 touchdown in the game, and that has a lot to do with the play of Richard Lego. And in the second half, the defense did a great job of honing in on Austin Carr and Justin Jackson. He only had 1 catch for about 20 yards in the second half. But Richard Lego just could not do anything. He was inept at quarterback. He threw 2 interceptions. The offense had no rhythm. He was missing throws. I remember in the first half he had to throw to Nick Westbrook along that northwestern sideline. Completely missed him. He was wide open. That would have moved the chains for the Hoosiers. It was in, I think, late first quarter, early second quarter. It would have totally changed the dynamic of that game, give them some confidence. Instead, it went to a long third down. They couldn't convert, and they were off the field in 3 plays. And it just seemed to just it was kind of like the domino effect. I mean, just didn't work out in the first half, and then it just moved on and on and on in the second half, and they just never really clicked. They had 1 good drive, and that was the touchdown drive, but they get it in the red zone and they stall, and they get a field goal, and you just can't do that. So going forward, Richard Lego has got to step up. These are do or die games at this point.
I completely agree with you, and I'm trying to think of something. I tried to think of something. I know we were talking before the show. I tried to come up with something different. We both tried to come up with 2 different things to talk about, but this red flag at Richard Lego, we can't quite sum up well enough. I mean, both those interceptions, which, by the way, were fantastic interceptions by the Northwestern secondary and Montre Hardage and Kyle Cairo, excuse me. Fantastic interceptions, SportsCenter top 10-esque. But those were underthrown. Those balls are touchdowns if they have enough air under them. And then in the fourth quarter, with about 4 minutes left, IU's driving, and Lego's got Ricky Jones on an out route wide open, completely airmails the end zone. That would have brought it within 1 score with plenty of time to recover an onside kicker, maybe get one last chance if you stop Northwestern, give them a 3-and-out if you can't recover that onside, which they had done plenty of times in that second half. So after not making these throws and underthrowing downfield guys and just completely missing these 20-yard throws, he's not really reading the field well either. And I thought he did a better job of that. Josh, you had a much better vantage point than I did for that Northwestern game. We were both there at Ryan Field. But to me, I think he read the field better. He did not force as many throws as he did against Nebraska and Wake Forest, but he was not that accurate. You know, going to the other side of the field, he looked kind of like Clayton Thorson did last year. He couldn't make an accurate throw, and it's a problem if you're IU. And going forward, if Richard Lego, like you said, does not change basically everything that he's doing in the pocket, this offense is going to struggle. And I would like to see Xander Diamont. I'm not calling for Lego's head. I'm not saying to start Diamont over Lego. I'm not going to go that far, because if Diamont were to start in place of Richard Lego, this offense would be a mess. But bring him in for a couple drives. Have a package where you can bring him in for 10, 12 to 15 plays. And if you want to run 80 plays a game, having Xander Diamont in at the quarterback or in the slot or anything, running Wildcat, whatever you want to call it, for 10 to 15 snaps, it's not going to kill you. So that's what I'd like to see this weekend against Maryland, is a little bit of Xander Diamont, just to change it up. It worked for Northwestern in 2012. They had a slinger in Trevor Simeon and a runner in Kane Coulter. I'd like to see it here. At least give it a shot. It's do or die, like you said.
I completely agree. I mean, he went into that Nebraska game, and it was a complete change of pace. Nobody knew he was going to come in against Maryland this weekend. This is a 5-2 team. This is no slouch. You need to pull out some stops. You're at home. You should win this game. I was talking about this on my radio show yesterday. You have to take the next step, and to take the next step, you have to win games like this. When you're up against the wall, you need this game. This is a Maryland team that's definitely beatable. If you want to be at that next level as a program, Maryland's a team you need to beat year in and year out. I know this is a good year for the Terrapins, but it's also a pretty good year for Indiana for the Indiana defense, and the offense is just holding them back. So at this point, you've got to get some positive momentum going into that Rutgers game because it's on the road. I know Rutgers is terrible, but it's still on the road. It's a noon game. You got to get up for that. So get some momentum this week. Go into Rutgers next week, and then come back for Penn State a couple weeks down the road and maybe shock the nation there. So there's still a lot of season left. There's still definitely 3 wins there, but you need to get more consistency on offense. That starts with Richard Lego, and maybe that starts with getting Xander Diamont into the game a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, there are definitely still 3 wins there. We're not writing them off for a bowl game. Just if they continue down this path offensively, I don't see 3 wins likely on their schedule, including this weekend. I don't think that could end well unless Lego changes it up or Kevin Wilson decides to throw Xander Diamont in there. And while we're on this topic of the offensive struggles, and then we'll get to previewing Maryland, I just want to read you the stat because I don't quite know what to make of it. Because to me, if you have an offensive line as good as IU's, with a right guard as good as Dan Feeney, you should be running, and a running back as good as Divine Redding, you should be running the ball not every down. Don't get me wrong. You should not be running it every down, but you should certainly be running it, with consistency. And on first downs this year, Divine Redding has touched the ball 68 times. 68 times on first down. On first down this year, Richard Lego has thrown the ball almost 100 times. Why are you throwing the ball on first down 30 more times than you're running it? That's just something that, and when you set this offense up, because if you're going to throw on first down, I can't even remember the last time Lego completed a first down throw, with the exception to that Nick Westbrook bubble screen that he ran 80 yards for a touchdown. If you don't complete that first down pass, you're looking at 2nd and 10 straight in the eyes. Running the ball is not going to get you more than 5 yards. I don't like the idea of throwing it on first down that often, let alone 30 times more than you're going to run it. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it caught me off guard, and I'm uncomfortable with it. You may feel differently. Other people may feel differently, but it caught me off guard, and I don't like it at all.
No, I am definitely right there with you. I think the play calling has a lot to do with the struggles of this team. There's no doubt about that because, like you said, first down, it should be pretty close to balanced. I mean, that's like 170 times. That should be absolutely split. That should definitely be split. There's no reason to be throwing the ball 30 more times than you are running the ball on first down. That's the down where you should keep teams guessing. But right now, teams aren't really guessing, and I'll get into this when we talk about Maryland a little bit. But you got to get this running game going. So let's talk about Maryland so I can get into this a little bit more.
I'll let you keep going. Go right ahead.
So I mean, I'm looking at this game against Maryland, and this team gives up about 400, close to 400 yards a game, which is fine. I mean, that's like a 5-2 football team right there. They haven't played that tough a schedule. But what really catches me off guard is this Maryland team gives up 190 yards on the ground. That is 20 more than they do through the air. So this game right here is where you get the running game going. And when you get the running game going, that's when you get Richard Lego going, because that opens up the entire offense. If you can finally get this running game going, Richard Lego be comfortable in the pocket. He'll be able to go through his progressions, find receivers, because the running game opens up the entire offense. We saw that last year where Jordan Howard and Divine Redding were fantastic, and that really opened up the entire offense, and it was a really dynamic offense. This year, there's been no running game, and there really hasn't been any passing offense either. If you can get the running game going, you can get the passing game going. So it starts with the run, and from there, the offense will open up, but you have to get the ground game going. Against Maryland, who gives up 190 yards on the ground, you have to get the run game going. That's a major key for this game. Not trying to be like DJ Khaled, but it's a major key.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you there. And this is a perfect opportunity for Indiana to actually try out running the ball on first down, which no matter who you are, that's what you should do. Plenty of more things can go wrong when you throw it on first down than if you run it. You don't need me to tell you that. So I find that very interesting. I didn't quite look up their rush defense compared to their pass defense. I knew their defense had some holes to it. It was definitely not top tier in the Big Ten, but that's interesting because Indiana now knows that whether they look at stats or watch film or both, they know that Maryland's defense is not incompetent, but it's not quite perfect. It's not the best rush defense they've seen all year. I'm not going to go bashing DJ Durkin. He's done a great job this year, but his defense is not quite up to par. And if I'm Kevin Wilson, I'm running this football. I'm tired. I myself am tired of seeing them throw it on first down. I made that pretty clear, so that's a great point that you bring up, Josh. I absolutely would love to see them run the ball first play out of the gates, if not the first 2 or 3. It absolutely has to happen. I'm going to stay with the running game conversation. Maryland has 6 guys offensively that have over 100 rushing yards, and combined with those 6 guys, they have 8 touchdowns to show for it. Indiana has 3 guys with over 100 yards and 1 touchdown to show for it. Divine Redding has to step up. And again, it's not completely on him because he hasn't been set up to succeed like the running backs were last year in Jordan Howard and Divine Redding. Like we said with those first down throws instead of running it. And I'd like to see a little bit more of Mike Majette, maybe even Xander Diamont. But with Dan Feeney back against the Maryland defense in a front 7 that's not that strong, this is a perfect opportunity to run the football, just going off what you said and what we've been talking about. It could have been huge last week against Northwestern, but the Northwestern front 7 is ferocious, far better than Maryland, and Indiana's got this game at home. So take that however you want, but Indiana has to be up to par with Maryland running the ball, and they absolutely can be, despite what the statistics say. Excuse me. So that's promising, although the stats won't tell you to be optimistic. But at this point, I just completely highlighting what you said. Indiana has to run the ball. They're capable of doing it. They just have to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to your point, you need to mix up those running backs. And it's not just mixing up the running backs. It's mixing them up within a drive. Like, I mean, I feel like we're seeing like this drive is Divine Redding's drive. This drive is Mike Majette's drive. This drive is Devontae Williams' drive. Mix it up within the drive. I mean, I alluded to this on my radio show again last night. The Seahawks, they rotate running backs. They rotate their defensive line. That's the big thing. They rotate their defensive line and keep guys fresh. Throughout a 60-minute football game, if you just run Divine Redding up the gut 3 times in a row, you're not going to get much. If you keep defenses off balance, though, and bring in Divine Redding on first down, bring in Mike Majette on second down, and then maybe bring Divine Redding back for third down in the short yard situation, you're going to keep defenses off balance because each of those 3 running backs do things differently. Mike Majette's good out of the backfield in the passing game. Devontae Williams is similar, but Divine Redding is good in between the tackles, and we just haven't seen that this year because teams are just stacking the box when you know it's going to be a running down, and it's too predictable in the play calling. And if you would mix up this offense just a little bit, I think it'd make it really dynamic. And I don't know how Kevin Wilson's going to go about doing that, but he needs to find a way. And maybe mixing up running backs within a drive is how you do it. But something has to change, and this is big. The running game has to get going.
And you bring up a very interesting point. With talking about Divine Redding in between the tackles. He is better in between the tackles. He doesn't quite have the speed that Mike Majette or Devontae Williams possess. So my next question is, how come whenever we see Divine Redding take the carry on a long down situation, whether it's 2nd and 10 or 1st and 10, I feel like we always see him run outside the tackle, and he always gets sniped down. Anthony Walker, I remember, chased him down on the 3rd and short. I mean, they tried to run it outside the tackle. He's just not fast enough. So I'm tired of seeing him run outside the tackle. He's better in between the tackles. If you run it outside, exactly like you said, bring in Devontae Williams, bring in Mike Majette. I don't want to see Divine Redding try and outrun these all Big Ten linebackers or even the cornerbacks because he's not going to do it. The next thing I have is Perry Hills, Maryland's quarterback, has thrown 31 passes in the second half all season. All season, in the second half, he's thrown 31 passes. In the first half, he's at about 80. So the first 3 quarters, first half, really, he's pretty consistent with those numbers too. If Indiana can make them play from behind and force them to throw in the second half, Perry Hills is not that experienced in throwing the ball when they have to rush and score. I like Indiana's chances in this game. So it's pretty simple. My second key for this, It's just get ahead early. Make some stops in the run game. Force Perry Hills to throw. Get in the backfield on first down because they're going to run it, which is what you should do too if you're Indiana. But Maryland's going to run it on first down. If they can snuff it out, give them 2nd and 9, 10, 2nd and 11 even, and force Perry Hills to throw, they'll put themselves in position to win this game throughout the full 60 minutes.
Definitely. I'm going to look at this from the Maryland perspective, though, and I'm going to say if you're DJ Durkin and Maryland, you need to get ahead early in this game because Indiana, as they've hung around in a lot of games, and how Indiana has lost those games is because the opponents get out to big leads early. We saw Northwestern got out to a big lead early. We saw Nebraska get out to a big lead early. We saw Ohio State get out to a big lead early. Michigan State was unable to do that. They only went up 2 touchdowns. But if Maryland gets out to a big lead early, Indiana's really in trouble, and that's going to put the pressure on Indiana. So if you're Maryland in this game, put the pressure on Indiana. They're the home team. They should be the team that's going out and trying to assert itself because they need this game more than Maryland does. I know Maryland wants to get to a bowl, and they can do it this week with 6 wins. But Indiana needs 3 wins. So if you're Maryland, put the pressure on Indiana and go out and just play your game. And then if you're Indiana, you gotta find a way somehow to come out firing on all cylinders. It just has to happen. You can't go down 17-0. You can't go down 21-0. You have to find a way to get out early in this game, or else Maryland's going to put you on the back foot. And like you said, use their running game to just lull you to sleep and run the clock out in the second half. That's what we saw against Northwestern. That first half seemed to take 2.5 hours. The second half took like an hour and a half. So it's all about that running game in the second half. And if it's a tight game, it could favor Indiana. But if they're down early, it's going to be a really big issue.
And on that note, Maryland is not going to play with the same tempo that Northwestern played with last week. Maryland doesn't quite run 70 plays a game, and that's about 10 plays under the pace that Northwestern played. And when Northwestern did the damage on Indiana early in that first quarter to go up by 3 touchdowns right away, it seemed like, they were moving so quick that Indiana could not even make defensive substitutions. So that's where Indiana fell behind. And then when Northwestern slowed it down in the second half, we saw Indiana completely lock them down, and they had something like, what was the number, 37 total yards in the second half. Is that right? It was something just absurd like that. Josh is giving me the nod of approval, so we're going to go with that. So if Indiana, again, if they can hold defensively early, they should be able to stay ahead this entire game because Maryland, again, does not play with pace, and that is exactly what killed Indiana last week. If you take tempo out of that game, Indiana shuts that Northwestern offense down completely. I'm convinced they don't score a touchdown because when they scored their only 3 touchdowns, they were moving quicker than I've ever seen them move. So that's just of note there. And then my third stat here is, again, kind of what I talked about earlier. What we've been talking about is the Maryland run game. In wins, in their Big Ten wins, I should say, against MSU last week, Maryland had 247 yards on the ground for 6 yards per carry. And against Purdue, they rushed for 400 yards, almost 9 per carry. In losses against Minnesota, 130 yards in that game, 3.5 per carry. And then against Penn State, 170 in that game and 4.5 per carry. So it's simple. If you shut down that run game, Maryland's offense stalls. Perry Hills cannot do enough to overcome a great defense. And if this Indiana offense can put up points and stall the run game for Maryland, they will win this game. I will go that far and say it. And the tempo, their lack of tempo, or it maybe not necessarily a lack of tempo, but it doesn't quite sniff up to Northwestern's. They're 106th in the country in total plays run, and that's including a rout against Purdue, 50-7. They're going to be in position to win this game, and I think that they could control this game for the full 60 minutes.
Yeah, that'd be obviously great to see. Whether that happens, yet to be seen. But my last thing for this game was not necessarily a key. It's just do whatever you have to do to win this game. I don't know after this game if there's 3 more wins on schedule. You have to win this game. This is as close to a must-win as there is because you'll probably beat Rutgers. You'll probably beat Purdue. Michigan and Penn State are no sure thing. Michigan's definitely not going to happen. I can say that right now. Penn State, potentially a chance. But this is there's 3 wins on this schedule, and it starts on Saturday. You have to go out and win that game. Do whatever you have to do. Pull out all the stops you need to do. Fake a punt, fake a field goal, put Xander Diamond in the game. Just do whatever you have to do. It's a must-win game. It's at home. It's against Maryland. They're not that fantastic. You got to find a way. Just have to find a way.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ways that it can be done. It's not a tall task for Indiana, despite what Maryland's record is, despite the fact that they're playing much better than expected and they've got the swagger and momentum going for them. Despite what all that says, Indiana can win this game a multitude of ways. They just have to execute and play to their strengths, and they should have this one. Again, that's no guarantee. We're watching Indiana football here. We have no idea what to expect, not just every week, but pretty much every time that they step on the field for each possession. So, quick prediction time. We don't do scores here. It's just too slippery of a slope. But Josh, who do you see ultimately coming out? Has Kevin Wilson seen enough to realize that some changes need to be made offensively and snap this offense out of it, or do you think he's not quite there yet?
I don't think he's quite there yet, but I still am picking Indiana to win this game, and I think they're going to do it with their defense. I think there's at least three Tom Allen takeaways, and one of them is going to be for a touchdown. I'm just feeling something about this defense. They've won games for this team this season. I don't think they've really lost a game for this team this season, but they're going to win a game for this team on Saturday. The offense is sputtering. I don't know if it can really be fixed in the middle of the season like it has been. But this defense is so stout, they're going to keep them in the game, and whether the offense just scores at least more than one touchdown, I'm feeling a win on Saturday. I don't know how it's going to be done, but I think the defense is going to be key to getting a win.
I'm writing that down. 3 takeaways and 1 for 6. We'll see if it happens. But I agree with you. I don't agree with how they're going to do it. Obviously, the defense is going to step up. They haven't lost them a game all year. You're completely right. But I really think, I hope at least, maybe this is just wishful thinking, that Kevin Wilson realizes Lego is not good enough to play the full 60 minutes. I think he mixes it up a little bit. I think we bring in Xander just for a couple possessions, not for the full half, not for a full quarter, but mix it up a little bit on that first or second drive just to set the tone and keep that Maryland defense on his toes. I think they use Divine Redding, and I think the Hoosiers come out on top by 10 points. I think they could really handle this game and really give it to Maryland. So we'll see. That might be wishful thinking. I hope not, but we will find out on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game. I mean, it's a home game, and chances are running out. You just got to go out and find a way to win. That's all I got to say about this game. You just have to find a way.
Yeah, and the defense has found ways in the past, but the offense has not, lived up to, not done their part fully. So we'll see what happens. Fingers crossed that game again on Saturday. Absolutely tune in. Should be a good game, and hopefully the Hoosiers can come out on top. Now, despite not talking about the World Series that much, and it's hard for me because you all know I'm a Cubs fan, and I've been on my edge since they won that NLCS, but we're going to do a little uninterrupted kind of World Series version. We're not really going to talk about baseball and X's and O's, but we both have something to do with the World Series with the uninterrupted. Josh from the broadcasting standpoint, me from kind of the MLB standpoint. So, Josh, I'll have you hit lead off here.
All right, sounds good. So I'm just scrolling through Twitter today, and obviously all the media is out at Wrigley Field today for batting practice, whatever you want to call it. Kyle Schwarber's not going to be able to play in the outfield, so that's interesting from the Cubs standpoint. But I was scrolling through Twitter and found this really interesting article from Joe Buck, who's obviously doing the game on TV for Fox. And I say doing TV because this is the first time a World Series will be broadcast on TV from Wrigley Field, and it's really hard to believe. And Joe Buck, I mean, he gets criticism from so many people, from every fan base. The Seahawks fans had a petition and have Joe Buck never do a game again. And there's been many other teams that have done very similar things. But what Joe Buck is about to do is he's making history, and he's doing a TV game from Wrigley Field. And he already kind of made history the other night by calling the Cubs game of them winning the NLCS. So, I mean, Joe Buck obviously went to Indiana, then went on to broadcast the Cardinals with his father for a while. And, I mean, this is just as he called it, like, as a sports fan, this is the number one highlight of his career. I mean, it doesn't get bigger than this. The World Series at Wrigley Field. And he also mentioned, I mean, Cardinals fans, if they were given 4 tickets to a game to go meet the manager and do whatever, just go to a game at Wrigley Field in the World Series, I'm sure they would walk there. That was what he said. So, I mean, this is going to be really interesting. It's going to be really great to see. Wrigley's going to put on a show. I have no doubts about that. Wrigleyville's going to be awesome, but it's going to be really, really cool to see a World Series game from Wrigley Field on TV. So for the first time since, I think the first World Series was broadcast on TV in 1948. So the Cubs weren't in there, and they were last in there in 45. So really interesting stuff there, and we'll see what it looks like on TV come tomorrow night.
Hopefully it looks pretty. And yes, Wrigleyville is going to be a mess. I think I saw today and confirmed with a guy I know that lives in Wrigleyville, residents are not allowed to park there from tomorrow at lunchtime until, I believe, Monday morning or Sunday late night, which is absolutely bad. It would be a complete mess to be there right now. It's going to be a party for 3 days. And then bars are charging like north of $300 just to get in. So they're using this opportunity, this literally once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, to just print money. So, Wrigleyville, if you're in town this weekend, is just going to be absolutely epic and something like we've never seen before. But mine is about the playoff format, and not really just MLB specific, but the World Series format. I was thinking about this morning, and it really, really got me thinking. And I'm not going to talk about the All-Star game deciding home field advantage. That's a conversation for another day. Obviously, I'm going to be a little biased this year because my Cubs are finally in it, but that's neither here nor there. That's a conversation for another day. But the MLB's World Series format is 2-3-2, as you all know. The first 2 home games for the home field, the team with home field advantage, middle 3, the team without it, and then the final 2 with the team with it. And the NBA switched their finals format from 2-3-2 to 2-2-1-1-1 just a couple of years ago, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I like that better. However, it really got me thinking, is there a better format out there? I was watching Colin Cowherd's show this morning, and listen to this. He suggested a 1-2-2-2, where that one game at the beginning goes to the team without home field advantage. So they get one game at home, and then they travel. So we'll put it into World Series context. Cubs get game 1 at home. Cleveland gets games 2 and 3. The Cubs get games 4 and 5, and then Cleveland gets 6 and 7 to finish the series. And at first I thought this is completely ridiculous, but once he explained it, he said he thinks it's completely absurd in any situation, that especially in the MLB, because the Cubs were by far the best regular season team in baseball, that the team without home field advantage should have to start the season 2 games on the road and then end the series 2 games on the road. It puts them at a very unfair advantage at the beginning and very unfair at the end. And I think this is the case across all sports. And I like the 2-2-1-1-1 much better. And I thought about this 1-2-2-2. And Josh, I can see you're thinking over there. I'm about to put you on the spot. I apologize for that. I'm going to say part A to this question is, first of all, what are your thoughts on the diagnosis that Cowherd put together for the 2-3-2 and his resolution there for 1-2-2-2? And B, would you change any of the home formats in the postseason? Would you make them all universal, 2-3-2, 2-2-1-1-1, or something completely different? Because I think this is a very interesting conversation.
No, that's spot on by Colin Cowherd. I think I mentioned him on this show last week, and he had a really good point last week. I really like that 1-2-2-2 too. So because you start off game 1, it's one game, that's fine. But what I was really looking at was games 3 and games 5, because those are the 2 games that can kind of make or break a series. Because tomorrow night, potentially a huge game. If the Cubs win, they have the upper hand for the next 2 games because they're at home for the next 2 games, and they could potentially clinch at home if they win tomorrow. Now, on the other hand, if the Indians win tomorrow, the Cubs still have the upper hand because they're at home for the next 2 games. So the Cubs are pretty much at a pretty good advantage right now because they broke the home field advantage last night by getting a win. So I really like that 1-2-2-2-2 because you put one team at home for game 3, which is a deciding game. It's 1-1 right now. Whoever wins this game will have the upper hand. And usually game 5, if a series is tied up 2-2, that's a huge swing game as well. So I really like that, having one team have a swing game at home and another having another swing game at home, because those are 2 humongous games that could swing a series either way. And then your second question was about the overall how I would format it. I'd probably go 2-2-1-1-1. I just think that's the most fair way of doing it. You give the team with home field advantage the first game or the first 2 games, then you go on the road. But I just don't like those 3 games in the middle because that can just swing a series too much one way or the other. I don't like having them have 3 games in a block in the middle. I just feel like that's too much like the regular season, just having it like a weekend series. But so I'd probably go 2-2-1-1-1. That's how I'd do it.
Yeah, I think 2-2-1-1-1 is the best. I really don't like 2-3-2. I never have. I never will. But this 1-2-2-2, I mean, that is as interesting a take as I think I've ever heard. I've never heard anyone suggest that. I've never heard anyone talk about that. I think he just completely made it up, just completely on the spot, and he's great at that. But I think it's sensational. I think his analysis was absolutely brilliant. And the thing that I just can't get over, it's so true that no one really talks about, is in a 2-3-2 format, the team with the advantage gets the first 2 and final 2. I mean, game 2 swings everything, or not everything, but game 2 is huge because obviously one team is going to be up 1-0 after game 1. The difference between 2-0 and 1-1 is unworldly how big it is. So I think it's fascinating. I think we should get rid of 2-3-2 altogether for all formats, for all rounds of all playoffs. I think it's completely ridiculous. It's completely unfair. And in the MLB's case, sometimes it's unfair for no good reason. As you're looking at with the Cubs, had over 100 wins, yet they have to play games 1, 2, 6, and 7 on the road. So I just think it's an interesting conversation. If you guys have any ideas, anything you want to throw at us, that's at Josh Eastern on Twitter. I am at M_Dugan44, DUGAN. And together we are at the Hoosier Life. Tweet at 1, 2, or all 3 of us. We'd love to interact with you guys. And possibly come up with a solution to send to all the commissioners across the sports world to fix this issue. So without further ado, and this is one that we tossed around back and forth, Josh. We thought about this morning. Credit to you for coming up with it. Dipping into our I don't even know where I was going with that, so I'm going to stop myself there. I'm going to get right to it. Top 5 sports video games. It's a hot topic with kids our age. NBA 2K17 came out recently. I think it's fantastic. Spoiler alert, it's not on my list. But our top 5 sports video games. Okay, Josh is throwing it at me that he did coaches. I completely screwed that one up, but don't worry, I have a list for that too. I got my documents mixed up. It's all good. You scared me there for a second. I apologize for that delay, that pause. But we are doing top 5 college coaches. College football coaches, with kind of the season in full swing. We've got Halloween weekend this week, and then the following weeks we got football in November, and that's extremely meaningful across the board. So Josh, I'm going to have you start off. We're going to go 5 through 1. We'll alternate top 5 college football coaches, not sports video games. Go ahead.
All right, sorry to throw you a bit of a curveball there. Just want to make sure we were on the same page there. But
no, that was totally my bad. Totally my bad.
Okay. So number 5, I'm going to go – this is a kind of one that's off the beaten path a little bit. I'm going to go with Kyle Whittingham at Utah. He has come in there, and he has been consistent year in and year out. They usually get to a bowl. Usually it's not just 6 wins. Usually they're at 8 wins, 9 wins. But you never want to go to Utah and play a game there. Tough atmosphere. It's a smaller stadium. They're right on top of you. And it's a really steep stadium. I have not been there. I've just only seen it on TV. It just seems like it's a really steep stadium, and it just seems like the crowd is right there on you. And Kyle Whittingham has done a fantastic job there. I think he's a very underrated coach, but he's been successful at Utah. And it's hard to be successful at Utah before they joined the Pac-12. Now in the Pac-12, they aren't as successful as they were maybe in the past, but these past 2 years have been great. Last year, they were in the top 25 most of the season. This week, they're hosting College Game Day against Washington. So he has his program at a pretty good spot. So I'm going to go Kyle Whittingham at Utah, number 5.
My number 5, I like that pick a lot. I like the Pac-12. But I'm going to go with Dabo at number 5. I think just the way that he took over this Clemson program a few years ago, and he really kind of jumped onto the national scene when they took out Auburn in 2011, right, fresh after Auburn's national championship victory. Their first road loss in forever, and they stormed the field, and Dabo went crazy in the post-game press conference. And then obviously what he's done from there has been sensational. They've been in the national title hunt. They had that game against Florida State in 2013, I believe, at home that they got obliterated, but they were top 5 in the country then. I think that was their lone loss on the year, if I'm not mistaken. Don't write me down for that. They may have had 2. But nevertheless, we're getting too nitpicky right there. Dabo's number 5, obviously going to the national championship last year, going toe-to-toe with Nick Saban. They almost had it. He's absolutely in this top 5, but nowadays there are so many good coaches out there where I can't put him any higher than 5.
Yeah, I mean that's a solid pick. I actually don't have Dabo in my top 5. It's a tough top 5 to crack, but my number 4, I'm staying in the Pac-12. I'm going Chris Peterson. I'm not trying to be a homer here, but this guy's a fantastic football coach. He has one of the best winning percentages in college football history. He built up Boise State to what it is now, and that's hard to do. Boise State is in the middle of Idaho, not a whole. It's not a destination college, but he's really made it. I mean, a bit of one. I mean, they went to the Fiesta Bowl. They beat Oklahoma. That was kind of their coming out party, and they've been successful year in and year out since then. And then he came over to Washington, and that program was at a pretty bad spot. Steve Sarkisian left. It was just a few years after they went 0-12, and now he is Washington at number 4 in the country in the college football playoff hunt. They're going to Utah on Saturday. That's going to be a humongous matchup. It's College game day. But what Chris Peterson has done at Washington is fantastic. He's used his resources, and he's completely changed the dynamic in the Pac-12. I mean, Oregon was a huge powerhouse when he went to Washington, and all of a sudden the tides have kind of turned a little bit. Oregon not getting the same recruits that they once were, and Chris Peterson's getting guys who he calls OKGs, our kind of guys, and he's done a fantastic job over there at Washington, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But Chris Peterson, number 4.
I completely agree with that. I don't know how – I thought about this, obviously, a little bit and then finalized it just now. But Chris Peterson is right on the outside looking in of my top 5. It's hard to deny what he's done at Washington, and then how he got to Washington was by ways of Boise, Idaho, and what he did there was just tremendous, bringing them to national relevance, really, and how good they were and how relevant they still are, and that's much thanks to him. My number 4 is Bob Stoops, and I know a lot of people are calling for his head. It's completely unjust. Yes, the Big 12 doesn't play defense, and if you threw him in the SEC, I don't know how good he would be. Maybe he'd be a perennial 10-win coach, maybe not. But I'm looking at his track record right here, and he's gotten fewer than 10 wins, so single-digit victories 3 times in his tenure at Oklahoma since 1999 when he took over. And one of those was his first year when he went 7-5, but the following year in 2000, undefeated national champions. So those canceled each other out at least right there. And they haven't really been back. They finished the year at number 3 a couple times, but they finished in the top 10 pretty much the vast majority of his seasons in Oklahoma. He recruits well. He's produced NFL talent. Kevin Wilson coaching tree right there. I guess that's vice versa, but the point remains the same. But Bob Stoops is my number 4. And for anyone that's calling for his head at Oklahoma, I think that's completely, it's just not right. I think he's one of the best coaches that you're going to find in college football.
That's a great pick. And he's another guy from Youngstown, Ohio. It's this whole coaching tree from Youngstown, Ohio. I don't know what it is. It's where my mom's from, which is really random, but it's just all these football coaches are from Youngstown, Ohio. Somehow, I mean, like Bo Pelini's from there. The Stoopses are from there. Jim Tressel is the president of Youngstown State University. It's just really kind of bizarre. Just a random city up there in Northeast Ohio. But that's beside the point. My number 3, I'm going back to the Big Ten now. I'm going to go with Jim Harbaugh. It's hard to – I mean, this top 3 is pretty hard to stray from. My number 3 is Jim Harbaugh. Just what he's done at Stanford. I mean, he completely built Stanford up to what it is today. Stanford was never good. I mean, it might go back all the way to John Elway. They were not good when he took over. They beat USC. Then they went to the Orange Bowl with Andrew Luck, and they really just built that program up. And that was because of Jim Harbaugh's recruiting. There's just something about him now at Michigan. I mean, he just fires you up. I mean, there's nothing really to say. He's just such a fiery football coach. He gets great recruits. He's exciting to be around. Not if you're an Ohio State fan, but if you're a Michigan guy, absolutely. I mean, this is the coach of the future. He went to Michigan. There's so many things I could say about him, but he's my number 3. Great coach.
He's my number 3 too, and I have a very, very scary feeling that our top 3 is going to be the exact same order. But I mean, it just goes to show how many incredibly talented and great coaches there are in college football. But absolutely, Jim Harbaugh. He started in San Diego, University of San Diego, in 2004, went 7-4. And then the next 2 years went 11-1. I mean, if that's not the most Harbaugh thing ever, I don't know what is. And then went to Stanford, like you said. Stanford was absolutely pitiful, but before Harbaugh got there, and he started 4-8, and then that was the year I think they beat USC, one of the biggest upsets in college football history. I mean, if you can name someone from that Stanford team, I will stand up and applaud you, because I can't. My parents are huge Stanford fans. I remember watching that, and I still can't name someone from that Stanford team. And then he went on to go 8-5, and then 12-1, and I think that one loss was to Oregon. I remember he couldn't beat Oregon, and they were 4th in the country. They won the Orange Bowl, and he put Stanford in the position that they're in right now, where David Shaw picked up where Harbaugh left off. So Harbaugh number 3, and not to mention what he's, obviously we all know what he's doing at Michigan right now. The 3 losses last year were all to fantastic teams. But so Jim Harbaugh at number 3, and then I think I know what's coming at 2-1 for not just you but me as well.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to stray away from this top 3. I mean, obviously I got to go Urban Meyer. I mean, just a fantastic football coach once again. All these guys are fantastic football coaches, but what sets these top 3 apart is their ability to recruit and really bring a mentality to the program that is just different from the rest. And there's just something about them, something inside them that's ticking differently than the rest of them, that just brings success year in and year out. They know how to coach. They know how to recruit. Urban Meyer is just like what my number 1's going to be, and just like Harbaugh, they're very similar. They know how to win, and they know how to recruit. And in college football, those are the 2 biggest things. So Urban Meyer is my number 2.
He's my number 2 as well. And the more I think about this, I think the closer the gap is between Urban Meyer and Nick Saban that we can appreciate. You look at Nick Saban, he got his start at Toledo for 1 season, and then he was at Michigan State. He was never that great at Michigan State. He had his 1 year. He went 9-2 before going to LSU. We all know what he did there, won that national championship, and we all know what he's doing at Alabama. But you look at Urban Meyer, his worst season as a head coach is 8-5. And that's just unbelievable. Out of Florida, and he was battling some serious personal issues there. So, I mean, if you want to throw that out, you can. They still won that bowl game. And then where he picked up at Ohio State, you go 12-0, you can't play in the postseason. You go 12-0 again, and then you lose in the Big Ten championship, and then you lose in the Orange Bowl, and then you win the national championship, and then you're 1 win away from the national championship last year, and you're left outside the top 4, and you go ahead and win the Fiesta Bowl, and then they got that 1 loss this year. But I mean, Urban Meyer is as sensational a coach as you're going to get, and the thing that you could argue separates him and Nick Saban is Saban, he's going out and hiring the best minds out there. Lane Kiffin is heading the offense. Kirby Smart was in charge of the defense. At a very, I don't want to use this as an excuse because it's the same for Ohio State, but a very established football program, especially down south. And if you can get all that talent down south, you already have the leg up on everyone. So Nick Saban, he has a great eye for recruiting, and he hires the best guys out there, and his staff is second to none. But the gap between Urban Meyer and Nick Saban, and spoiler alert, that's my number 1. I'm sure that's yours too. I don't think anybody was going to be caught off guard by that. But Urban Meyer, just as a pure head coach, not to mention he went undefeated at Utah, I think you could argue he is a better coach than Nick Saban. I don't agree, but the numbers are there where you could make that argument.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. And back to that point about Stanford, Doug Baldwin and Richard Sherman were both on that team. And I just had to double check.
Was Richard Sherman on that team?
Yeah, I'm almost positive. I just checked. 2007, he might have been a freshman, but him and Doug Baldwin were on that team. So
okay.
Interesting factoid there. I wasn't sure, so I didn't want to call you out about it right away. But Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin were both on that team. I was thinking in the back of my head that they were, and I just double checked, and they are. But to my number 1, obviously, it's got to be Nick Saban. Just what he has done for college football in general. I mean, right now it is Alabama just far. It's just incredible how far and away, just how much better Alabama is as a football program than Ohio State or even just Michigan at number 2. I mean, this team is good year in and year out. They have a freshman quarterback, and they're number 1 by leaps and bounds. I mean, it's just incredible year in and year out what this team is able to do. They had a fifth-year transfer quarterback last year. This year, a freshman quarterback. It's just, I don't know where they get these people year in and year out, but it's just incredible what Nick Saban is able to do with the talent that he has. And I think about college football in this way. College football is a coach's league. It's a coach's game. If you have a good coach, you're probably going to be fairly successful. And that's completely different than the NFL, because I'm not discounting good coaches in the NFL, but if you have a good player in the NFL, that's, I think, completely better than having a good coach. And it's just really interesting to see the difference between college football and the NFL, because in college football, good coach brings good recruits, and that usually brings wins. And the NFL, good players usually bring a lot of wins. It's not so much the coaches as it's the players.
Yeah, I agree with you there to an extent. And, Nick Saban is my number 1. Just kind of got done talking about that. But you can't deny, if you want to argue Urban Meyer over Nick Saban, go ahead. I'll listen to you. I don't agree, but I will listen to you. But it's just so hard to deny what Nick Saban has done for the period of time that he's done it. And yes, he's had some losses, giving up 43 to Ole Miss last year, almost letting it slip away this year. And then in 2014, Ole Miss ran amok on them at Ole Miss. So, and that's that one team that he can't quite dominate in the past few years. And, he's had some head-scratching losses like that Oklahoma game in the Sugar Bowl, and he lost to Utah, I think, in the postseason, maybe in 06, 07. I don't quite – it was around that time period during Utah's undefeated season. So he's had some slip-ups where Urban Meyers are not that extreme. But, at the same time, he's got as many rings to put on one hand. So – and Urban Meyer's sitting pretty. He's got some too. But, I mean, Nick Saban is just – if I were to start my football program, I would take Nick Saban over Urban Meyer. It's close, but I would take Nick Saban over Urban Meyer. And you are correct where you say college football is a coach's league. You look at Tom Herman at Houston. Houston, with exception to Case Keenum, not that great in the past decade. Tom Herman comes in, Greg Ward's a stud, and this team can play football. They had a bad loss against SMU, but that's beside the point. PJ Fleck at Western Michigan. That team is undefeated, and they look like an actual toward the top tier, not quite tier 1 or tier 2, but toward tier 2 football team. And that's because of PJ Fleck, and he was able to turn that program into relevance just like that. So he actually is just on the outside looking in on my top 5 as well, despite being in the MAC. He is as sensational as they get. He just doesn't have the success that these other guys have.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't be surprised if TJ Fleck got a big job after this season. It's usually how it works. You have one good season, you move on. I think the Northern Illinois coach, when they were good, he's now at NC State. I'm blanking on his name right now, but it's really interesting to see what good coaches do. And you've seen it year in and year out with Michigan, with Alabama and Ohio State, and now recently Michigan once they got rid of Brady Hoke. It's really interesting to see the dynamic between a good coach and an average coach like at USC right now. And I know Clay Helton he's definitely a good coach, but he's just not at that same level as Chris Peterson or Nick Saban or Urban Meyer or Jim Harbaugh. He's just not on the same level, and that just kind of comes to show you why good teams are good and why okay teams are okay and why bad teams are bad. It's because of the coach and who they are able to recruit.
Exactly, and there's countless examples in each conference, and we're out of time, so we're not gonna waste your time with all that. But definitely come at us on Twitter if you agree, disagree with anything. We are still very open to suggestions if you want to change professional sports and their playoff home court, home field, home ice format. I'm all ears. I'm anxious. I'm ready to get this movement started, make it legit, because I think the 2-3-2 should be banished from professional sports forever. So that'll just about do it for us. Josh, you have any final thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, it should be a really interesting weekend with IU and then obviously with the World Series. So another busy sports weekend.
Yeah, in all likelihood, by the time we get to you guys next, there will be a World Series champion. It's going to be history either way. It's going to be a great series. It should go at least 6. I'd be stunned if it didn't. And then another big weekend in college football, both for the Hoosiers, home in Bloomington again, and just across the country with a bunch of top 5 matchups and possible top 10 teams in jeopardy.
Yeah, I got one more thing. I got to plug IU soccer. Obviously, a huge game this weekend. They sit in 4th place right now in the Big Ten, and they play Michigan State, who's in 2nd right now. It's the last game of the regular season, so a lot of seeding on the line.
We lost you for a second there, Josh. I'm sure it picked up, but I just couldn't hear you. But I believe what you said. I support what you said. You lost me at IU soccer. I couldn't hear you outside of that. But exciting end of the season, and we'll see what happens. So that'll do it for the 16th episode of the Hoosier Life. We'll come at you guys next week with number 17, recapping a hopeful victory over Maryland. And previewing what the Hoosiers need to do to get back to bowl eligibility. And we'll talk a little basketball because that time of year is here, believe it or not. Josh, we'll talk a little IUWBB too if you want to throw in a plug there. So we'll get to it all. It's going to be a busy week next week, but we're going to condense it all in under an hour for you guys to enjoy. So thanks for listening, and we will talk to you then.